Is Oklahoma going to win a playoff game?
Oh my gosh, Mark! It's the it's the it's the elephant in the room. It's the however many pound elephant you want to even call it this year. So we've talked about this several times, and so for me, from a playoff perspective, I think it's so. First, let me kind of talk about just the expectations. I think overall within the program, within the fan base, within just kind of at least locally in the media, it's going to be really important for Oklahoma to win a playoff game this year. So we'll kind of start with that. So whether you're looking at from a recruiting perspective, whether you're looking at this from just from a national perspective on what the worth is of this Oklahoma Sooner program right now. Are they a team that can get over the hump? Possibly play for a national championship this year, or are they a team that still is not quite there to be able to beat some of the bigger teams? And then you also have to take into consideration. Of course, we don't know this. We're thinking about we're just starting summer when this is we're getting close to the winter season. We're talking about these, but I think it's a big part of it's going to be a matchup. Who Oklahoma gets matched up with, and what that looks like when you go into a playoff situation. What does because there's so many intangibles that we don't know about right now. We don't know about injuries. We won't know about suspensions. Like there's so many things that can happen this year. But right now on what is today, May 20th, May 21st, I think Oklahoma does, at the very least, I think they will win a playoff game this year. Now, I'm not going to make any predictions about a national championship. I think they have the talent on both sides of the ball. Nothing through spring and thus far through the summer has led me to believe that they won't be in a position defensively to do what they need to do. I think there's some things that it hinges on, right? I mean, I think it was kind of interesting. I don't know how much you saw this, but Paul Feinbaum came out and said, who's historically an SEC sunshine pumper, obviously. And, he's been, kind of a little bit at the ire of Oklahoma and Big 12 fans. He came out and said that he thinks Oklahoma's the best team in the country. They don't have they really don't have any weaknesses, which, I think a lot of people kind of took, kind of had an eyebrow raise reaction to that, because number one, Feinbaum is not the type of guy that has ever been, a glowing endorsement for the Oklahoma football program. And I think too, you take some of these things that these folks say right now with a grain of salt, but I think there's a couple of things. So I'll say for Jimmy for the question, I think there's two or three things that kind of hinge on whether or not they'll be able to win a playoff game. For me, offensive line, specifically center. How do they play, and how does that position mature throughout the year? They're obviously, I don't think they're going to be great early on at center. However, now once the season kind of gets started, specifically towards the end of the season, they should be a little bit more consistent at that position. And how does that fall in line? I think perfect scenario for Bill Beanbo and Lincoln Riley. They have Andrew Rame entrenched in that position. I think entrenched in that position where if Andrew Rame isn't the guy who wins that position at center, how do the other pieces fall into place? So that's the number one, I think, kind of really question mark. And I'm not going to say a weakness. I don't really think Oklahoma has any what I would call a glaring weakness. I would say maybe really more of a question. Secondarily, I would say the secondary. I think Oklahoma improved a lot last year towards the end of the year. However, they still were ranked in, I think, around 80th overall in total. And when you look at against the pass, so they've got to improve there. They've got some improved guys that looked really good in the spring that I think give them a little bit more depth. They've got some new kids. Latrell McCutcheon is a guy that could play some. Billy Bowman could play some at the nickelback. You've got DJ Graham who's still a younger kid. So they've got a lot of good talent, but they're young. at that position. And then the wide receiver spot, I think for me is, and it's interesting when you think about the wide receiver spot on paper. This could be the best wide receiving core that Oklahoma has ever had. You got Theo Weiss, you got Jaden Hazelwood. Obviously, Trajan Bridges is no longer with the team, so he's not a guy that you think about. You've got Austin Stogner from a tight end perspective, and then and you've got Drake Stoops, and then they bring in Mike Woods from Arkansas, a guy that has put a lot of has played a lot, and then of course you got Marvin Mims as one of the best freshmen of the year. New kid and Mario Williams. So they've got 5 or 6 guys there. If they can get really good production out of 2 or 3, if 2 or 3 guys ended up being, kind of the guy and make that rotation, I think that's an opportunity for them, for Oklahoma to take that extra step. So those are the three question mark areas, I think. But having said that, I do think this is the year where Oklahoma will get over the hump, so to speak, and win that first playoff game.
There's got to be about a 90% certainty that they're going to play one of 4 teams.
Right.
They're going to play Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, or Georgia.
Yep.
Most likely.
Yeah, I mean, and that's there may be a team that doesn't, that to your point, that sneaks into that top 4, but as we did our rankings last week, as I kind of scoured the internet, kind of looking at a lot of the even pre-spring and post-spring, there's not a single ranking that I've seen by anyone that has anyone other than those 5 teams in that top 5, with, as you mentioned, with Oklahoma and Clemson and Alabama and Ohio State and Georgia. So and they all have. I think what's interesting about this year, Mark, is interested to hear your kind of thoughts. Is for the first time in quite a while, I don't think that we have a team that is really the odds-on favorite. You can make a solid case for any of the 5 teams, to win the national championship. When you look at Alabama, they've got a lot of question marks on the offensive side of the ball. A couple of offensive linemen to recover from losing. They have a new quarterback, new running back, new wide receiving core. When you talk about Clemson, maybe not as talented as a Clemson team as we've seen in the past, but they're going to be really strong on defense. Have a fairly new starting quarterback. Really the same with Ohio State. Maybe more of a question mark in the defensive secondary, and then obviously the quarterback position, and then you have Georgia, who looks to be stacked. And I can't disagree with you. Maybe the most talented team in the country, all things considered. But whether they lost a lot in the secondary as well. What do they look like? So, and then we mentioned Oklahoma. So, yeah, for me, it's one of those things. Do you take those 4, or do you take the field? Would be an interesting prop bet, as we kind of talked about some of the betting lines earlier. I would, if you had a gun to my head, I could not take any team other than those top 5 at this point.
Well, I definitely take those 5 against the field. If I only get the 4 minus Oklahoma against the field, I still take the 4, because I just think the percentages are just, not that Oklahoma is not capable of doing it, but just the percentages are just so overwhelming based on what we've seen. I went through, and I'm going to post a video soon where I've gone through the AP poll to see how accurate it is in projecting toward the playoff teams, the national champion, the national championship game participants, and then taking the reverse to see, okay, in the national game participants, where were they ranked? Well, yeah, it's become so much more predictable during this playoff era, where Clemson, Alabama were like 2-1, 1-2, 1-2. They, for a few years there, last year, Alabama was 1, Ohio State was 2 preseason.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Mark. I mean, it's funny, that is really, and this isn't probably another topic for another day, but it's the main driving force for the college football playoff expansion, right? It's the same teams almost every single year, Oklahoma, Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, Clemson. There's been Notre Dame's got in there a couple of times. I mean, Oregon's been there, Florida State has been there, but by and large, you have those same teams. So, I think obviously it's interesting for this discussion that we think it's obviously still going to be the same teams in the playoffs, and certainly to your point, Mark, as it relates to the AP poll, but then just generically as the fuel to the fire of the college football playoff expansion. That's where that's heading, and I think we all think it's inevitable. It's just kind of depending on what the format is going to be and when that happens.
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know we discussed them just a few weeks ago. To me, it's a great accomplishment, and certainly difficult to make the playoff, but to win a game in the playoff, or certainly to win a national, you're talking about a whole other level.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's this tier of maybe 8 to 10 teams, and then we narrow it down to like the 5 teams for the last several years. But then to get into that playoff and win it is a whole other level, because we have seen the likes of Michigan State and Oregon and Washington get in there, and Oklahoma several occasions play the one really good game against Georgia, but otherwise show that they weren't quite up to the challenge.
Yeah.
And those 3 schools that we've discussed, so minus Georgia, again, I don't have the exact numbers, but I think I presented those to you a few weeks ago. They're just overwhelming. They basically just beat each other.
Yeah,
is what's happened.
Mm-hmm.
So when Paul Feinbaum comes out with that kind of comment, the thing I find interesting is people have all sorts of motivations in the media to make statements, and he may truly believe that, and I think that's great. I've always approached my platform as I will give some commentary and some opinions and some predictions where people will just say, okay, sure, that's pretty boring. That's what everybody else thinks. But if that's what I truly believe, then that's what I truly believe. I think Spencer Rattler is the best quarterback in the Big 12. I'm not going to say that Skylar Thompson's the best quarterback in the Big 12 just to cause a stir and get people riled up and arguing with me. Right. But at the same time, I'm not going to shy away from an opinion that I have that may be controversial or be a contrarian opinion. I just give it authentic. Well, not everybody's like that. Some people are looking for an angle to cause a stir, and I'm not saying he's doing that. I would be interested to hear him name as many Oklahoma players as he can.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm with you.